My name's Adam Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of retention.com. Chase and I have been working together on a bunch of stuff, mostly around audience growth. I think for about the past, I'd say like 9 months. And he showed me a bunch of cool stuff on social media. Just a little bit about our company. We sell to direct consumer e-commerce brands. We're focused on big Shopify stores right now. I want to create a freemium product that would address the larger Shopify audience in a more mass market way, which we're working on. You know, Dr. Squash, Warby Parker, Bulletproof, BlendJet, Cuts Clothing, True Classic Tees. They are all our customers. They're all seeing a great result with their product. And I just want to mention that because, the best of the best are using it and it's working for them. And what I want to talk about today is something that, while I was sitting in the woods like a monk, 3 of our employees went to Commerce Next in New York last week. We led a roundtable. Mike Gebbio, our VP Sales, asked the roundtable, what is your biggest concern for 2024? Or what is your biggest focus for 2024? Halfway through 2023, 75% of them said list growth. Then he goes upstairs and watches the keynote, and the keynote was entirely about list growth. So I was happy to hear that because, you never know how these topics are going to go over sometime. Clearly, this is striking a pulse with the e-commerce audience. I want to get into everything I know about it. And by the way, what we do now is slightly different than my last company. My last company literally was an email marketing app like Klaviyo. And you just learn so much about both sides of the email game. One side is like how you actually grow your customers' lists. And then the other side is how you actually create and send and get to deliver an email. So what we do now is like a different way of growing lists. But I just want to say this is kind of the summary of all the wisdom that has been picked up along the way. And I'm excited about getting into it. So number one, why is list growth so critical? So I love this first point here. Email marketing, it continues to outperform every channel. I think you could make an argument that SMS maybe is a little bit better, but the scale is not quite as good. But 10 years ago, there were, magazine covers saying the death of email has happened because of, all of these different platforms that were coming out. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think email serves a very unique role in the world in terms of digital distribution. And one of my favorite sayings about email is that E stands for employed. If someone has an email address, they probably have disposable income to buy your product. And people sit at desks all day long and they're getting these beautiful newsletters and they click through and they buy stuff, which I think is one of the reasons why email performs so well. At least for this generation, we're in a position to where the actual readers of the emails have disposable income, which I love. And then number 2, customer retention and loyalty. This is, in my opinion, email's bread and butter. We actually have a way to acquire customers with email, but that's like, it's kind of a high octane use case if you want to think about it that way. But there is no better way to stay top of mind than be sending your audience beautiful, relevant content at a regular cadence over email. Number 3 is just this should just resonate so deeply with everyone on this call. You own your audience. None of these ad platforms allow you to actually control your audience. And with everything that's happening in the world today, with the Apple privacy changes and how the ripple effect they have into your ad program and your analytics and everything else, if you buy a visitor from Facebook, you have to buy that visitor again to come back. Like once you own an email address, until that person unsubscribes, it is yours to do with it what you please. You have to treat it respectfully. You have to give it what it wants. But owning your audience is so massive. No one can take your email list away from you. And then Data and insights, this is getting a little bit harder because probably many people on this call are aware, about a year ago, Apple started throwing an open signal for every email that hit an Apple device, regardless of whether it opened or not. So that made evaluating campaigns on open data a little bit more difficult. There's other ways to evaluate campaigns, and email still has a rich amount of data about it to evaluate and optimize. But it's just great to run A/B tests still off of click rates, and it's a really good channel to just continue driving efficiency through. So back to the basics. How you grow an email list. I think top left here is like the biggest one. You're driving traffic to your website, however you're doing that, either digitally or in real life, or partnerships or whatever. Pop-up forms have got to be your number one, and we're going to jump into the anatomy of a perfect pop-up form later. And a lot of times you could use paid efforts to maybe distribute a lead magnet or some sort of collateral on Facebook that would get you an email address. I mean, that's kind of a more popular strategy in B2B, but offers and incentives to subscribe are absolutely huge. You would just be shocked to see how well a pop-up does with an offer on it versus one that does not have one. Social media is a great place to collect emails, and I'll show you a really innovative strategy that I've observed happen in the past couple weeks of some guys that I think are doing a good job at that. And strong keyword placement and SEO can also drive traffic to your site. So how effective are email pop-ups? And the source of this is Privy. They started as an email pop-up company, great sort of freemium Shopify app, built out a whole robust email suite, and then they sold to a 10 of the SMS app. So without a discount, around 1% of people sign up. If you have a compelling discount, around 5% of people who hit your site sign up. In Enter to Win, Privy found out that 10% of people will sign up. Now, having been someone who owns one of these companies, I would say that 10% of people sign up, and it's probably still better than that 5% of people who sign up with an offer, but you will get some deteriorating quality with games, I find, because people are more interested in the game. Well, some people are more interested in the game than what you're actually offering. However, I still think it's a net lift from the offer itself. And by the way, if you go to privy.com, I'm not an affiliate, I'm not pushing this product at all. They have Enter to Win type pop-up widgets. So if you're like, I want to do that for my site, you can go use Privy, and it's plug and play to do. So let's talk about optimization of the pop-up form and what variables you have to play with, right? So timing and trigger, I don't think there's a one size fits all for this. Look, every business is different. And the tastes of the owner of every business are different, right? Like, I personally get annoyed when email pop-ups appear that gate content and don't let me see anything else, but that worked for One Kings Lane and they still do it, right? Like, I don't even know if people remember that site, but so make sure they appear at strategic moments in people's relationship with your site. Trigger options like scroll percent or time on page can make a pop-up seem less intrusive. This next one to the right, exit intent pop-ups, I think this was the biggest breakthrough in email collection that ever occurred. And I think it occurred around 2011. And from that point forward, everybody offered an exit intent product, and multiple vendors were claiming that they invented it, which is amazing. Wonderkin, who used to be Bounce Exchange, said they did. One of the Aeropop apps, I forget who the other one was, but the idea of the exit intent is, and I can tell you just from running one of these companies that had this pop-up, it is the most effective thing that you could do to collect an email. When the visitor is done interacting with the page, and they don't click through to another page and they go to leave to type something else in, a pop-up pops up, gets their attention. There's a big offer on it. And there just is a very high likelihood that they will submit their email relative to connecting it in any sort of static way. And then juicy offer, give them a reason to subscribe. Lead magnets and ebooks, I think, kind of cater a little bit more to B2B sometimes, but the discount codes, and you can A/B test discount codes with some of these pop-up apps. You can A/B test discount amounts with some of these pop-up apps. Finding the appropriate discount to maximize subscription rate there's a reason that you see that on virtually every site. It's because it works. And A/B testing is a great way to figure out what the appropriate copy and discount amount is. So make sure they're easy to fill out. There's a sort of rule of thumb in the internet that the more fields that you ask for, it will just drop your conversion rate by some sort of half-life or coefficient or whatever, however you want to say that. What I see is most direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands asking for email first. Maybe they set it up in a way to where the second time a pop-up pops up, it gives an even more compelling offer for a cell phone, because SMS is just so valuable if used the right way. But that's all stuff that's fairly easy to implement and experiment with. And then mobile friendly. Everybody's on their mobile now. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at their mobile versus desktop traffic. If you haven't, you should. You will probably be very shocked to see the percentage of people visiting your store on a mobile device. And we'll go through what mobile friendly actually means when it comes to pop-ups. So here's some examples of pop-up forms that we love. Grow with giveaways, spin the wheel, pop-ups. I think this one just looks very cool and very slick, and that's the whole experience. You put your email in, and then you spin it, and then whatever the result is, it tells you in this little window what it was and gives you a code. So Gong, it's a B2B company, but I just wanted to show one that, Chase also has his personal brand. He could use something like this. He sends out some type of info product when you sign up to his personal email list, but social proof is also very, very powerful always. And, use it whenever you can. And Cuts Clothing, I just really like the design of this. I lived in New York for a long time. I like that building. I lived like 3 blocks from that. And this, they're just doing it all. And by the way, here's an example of additional fields that clearly Cuts Clothing has tested this extensively, and they know that this doesn't slow them down in any way to ask men's, women's, or both. Just this last point is mobile pop-up best practices. We recommend doing a fly out format. So when they're scrolling down, it just sort of appears at the bottom of the phone. And then make sure to show value. This here's a discount. It's not a percentage. It's just they know their AOV and they know what they can afford to capture an email. And very few form fills on the mobile phone. I would be curious to see if Cuts's mobile form also asked men, women, or both. And then give a very easy way to get that pop-up away, because the real estate on a phone is so precious. And then, an actionable CTA, right? There's his sign up. So Chase, maybe this is a good time to break for a second.
Yeah. So do you mind going back? I think it's 2 slides, not
Cuts.
One more. Sorry. Let's see. One more. Sorry. Let's see, which one was it? I think it was the one that had all of like the behavior around like what you could do on a pop-up. Oh, this one. So I think this was the slide that they were referring to, but Catherine had said, can all of these be done on all platforms? Mine are set up on Klaviyo. And I'd say for the most part, I think all of these could be done on Klaviyo or any of the Privies, Just Unos, Wise Pops of the worlds.
I think so. If there's some part of this that I'm just not intimately familiar with each of the unique features that those platforms offer. But if there's one area that you're stuck on that you absolutely need, then I would bet, like, Privy started as a pop-up company. I'm betting that they have all of this stuff. And Just Uno is only a pop-up company. So I'm guessing that their feature set, what you have to pay for it, I'm sure, but it's probably incredibly rich when it comes to optimization.
Yeah, and just looking at these again, I'm almost positive Klaviyo has all of these, and most should, like, all these are kind of like the standard, basic ones now. Okay, cool. That was two of the questions. There's a question from Jordan saying, what's the best way to A/B test a discount on a pop-up when the underlying email is delivering the code, i.e. aligning the two? Or do you just deliver on the pop-up and keep the welcome email agnostic? It's a good question. So do you want to let me answer that?
Let me make sure I understand the question. So the question is, how do you A/B test on the pop-up and make sure the welcome series is consistent with it?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, 50% of people might get 10% off, and then the other 50% of people on the website might get 15% off, right? So how do you make sure the people that saw the 10% got the 10% via email?
Yeah, I would think that the journey builders in these email apps like Klaviyo do that. They would have to, right? What's your answer there, Chase?
Yeah, I know, like, for example, when we were using like Wheelio, I think we had to do something, and Wheelio was kind of like the spin to win, or there's like the spin to win apps. I know there was kind of something a little custom we had to do there because there was way more variables. There was like 5 or 6
Right.
variables. It was like a free product, 10% off, 20% off. So we had to do something a little bit custom there. But I think to Adam's point, when it's just like A and B, when it's just, this discount versus that discount, it should be fairly straightforward within some of these pop-up forms to be able to figure out that this email, opted in with this code, right? So that should be able to get passed through to the ESP to then be able to almost have like the code but be dynamic.
Yeah. And I would bet if Privy has a spin to win like this and the code got delivered in this way, that same code gets sent to your email. I'm bet it would be a horrible product design to not have that, as some sort of a merge tag or something in that email.
Yeah, agreed. And then we have 2 more questions, it looks like. Would you give the discount on the pop-up once the user filled out his or her email, or send the code via email immediately? I personally do both, like, give it to them right away, but also send it via email. That's what I do. Is yours the same?
I agree with that, Chase. Kind of a best practice if you're, whatever you're delivering, either the code or, if it's an ebook or something, it's like allow them to access it as many ways as possible is kind of my rule.
Yep. And then one more question for you. Should we have 2 different pop-ups, one for mobile and one for desktop?
Well, again, like, I haven't been in these builders in a long time. I would imagine, and this could be totally wrong, I would imagine they have, like, when I go mess with our website, it's got a desktop version, a tablet version, and a mobile version that I go mess with.
Yeah.
That, I would imagine, is an experience that probably should exist for pop-ups also. I can't state that for fact.
Yeah, and all the good builders, at least, you should have the view to be able to optimize or edit each version. But you're probably building first for the desktop version. Then if you need to make any changes, just go edit it in mobile. But obviously the offer and the content should be the same. Just maybe the optimization for mobile and desktop is slightly different.
Right.
Okay. And then the last question Larry asks is this for a double opt-in email environment? I personally don't like double opt-in. You just miss such a large chunk of people. Although every ESP, preaches and wants you to do it. I personally don't like double opt-in. What are your thoughts, Adam?
I owned an ESP. Double opt-in, you're only hurting yourself. I just know from a delivery standpoint, it doesn't justify the extra sort of whatever you want to call it, safety, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the word is, protection, like, I don't know. it's just not worth it. There's so many, the odds that people are just this, my attitude towards the internet, and I'm not talking about anybody in this call, the average visitor to your website is lazy. Do not make them do even the slightest amount of work above the minimum amount of work to accomplish what they need to accomplish. So that's kind of my theory about double opt-in.
Yeah,
It is
I
an
don't know.
unnecessary step that is just costing you owning a larger audience.
Yeah, I don't know the data, but I want to say like I've seen stats that like you'll miss out on anywhere between like 20 to 40% of signups, like by having a double opt-in. Like you miss out on a good chunk of people.
That doesn't surprise me. Who wants to go to their inbox,
Yeah.
especially if you logged in on mobile, you're probably not like, if you're on a desktop, then maybe you have your email open at the same time and you'll do that. But like the odds that you'll stop, because think about it this way. It's like, okay, I put my email address in to save 20%. I actually want to see what Cuts Clothing has to sell. I'm not going to go on my phone, open my inbox. I mean, I might, right? But like, it's just a lot of friction. You either made me leave the website to double opt in on my email address and thus broke the flow as a shopper, or I continue the flow as a shopper and I don't double opt in and you lost my email address. That's the two major friction points I see with double opt-in, like just thinking about the D2C experience.
Yeah, and the math behind it, like let's just say for whatever reason you lose 30%, right? So if you're only getting 5 or 10% of people to opt in the first place, and then you're immediately losing, a third of those people, your effective opt-in rate is so much smaller, right? You're down to like mid single digits instead of like, low double digits, right? So it's just the math also just kills you.
Right.
Let's take one or two more questions because we've got a few more and then we'll go to the next section. Michael asked on the double opt-in side, like what is the benefit? It's not legally required anywhere, right? So, I don't know if we've answered that or if you wanted to double down on what is the benefit here.
So there is the art and science of deliverability that is like a cornerstone pillar of email marketing. A lot of these like Klaviyo, MailChimp. So there's actually a couple things. One is, if someone signs up for an email newsletter, and then they go and click on a link in their email, they really want to be on that newsletter. So the intent of what is remaining is super high. It also eliminates the possibility of malicious activity towards your brand. What used to happen to us from time to time is a malicious actor, like a hacker, would figure out there's these email addresses called honeypots or spam traps that if you send to them, it destroys your delivery reputation. They would build bots that would go around to all of the sites that my company had forms on, and they would subscribe to those sites with a honeypot email address. And then we would send a confirmation and it would like blow us up. Does that make sense? So, there's ways around that. Like we ended up building like a little CAPTCHA, like, I am not a robot, in cases that we thought that might be happening or whatever. But that's another reason. It eliminates the possibility for malicious activity related to subscribing. You have to get pretty deep in the email world to even know that can happen. But that's definitely something that it eliminates.
For sure. And then one last point, and then we'll move on and we'll take more questions after. Jeremy mentioned that he did a launch with a double opt-in and it reduced their leads by nearly 40%. So I think our 20 to 40% is pretty accurate.
I'm not surprised.
Cool. All right, Adam, why don't we go through the next section and we'll field some more questions.
All right. The new school approach. So this is a very advanced strategy. I was just so blown away, and it takes a certain ingredients to do something like this. But I was so blown away by the effectiveness of it that I really wanted to share it. This is Ash. He and Ron Shaw have this company called Obvi, and they do a work in public, and they share everything about building this collagen brand. I would highly recommend following these guys. You kind of have to have a social media following to do this. Theirs isn't massive. It's not like Chase's, but they have an audience. I don't know. I think they each have like, maybe 8,000 followers on Twitter or something, right? These guys have figured out that they can grow their email list like wildfire, and people actually buy their product who subscribe to this email list. It's not just for the education. They basically go back through all of the interaction that they had that prior week, pull out a question, which in this case was, how do I increase my LTV? And then they'll basically like dictate a 5-minute diatribe about how everything they think about increasing LTV. They'll have a ghostwriter write like a 12-page guide or something, and then they put it on Twitter, and they're like, to get this 12-page guide, subscribe here. So that's totally different than an exit intent pop-up on a website, which is standard practice. But it's also, there's a really interesting trend I'm seeing right now of people. I personally am doing it, this work in public thing, and I think the benefits are just, they're just surprising. There's a guy who's got a company called Midday Squares that's doing it. Observe what these people are doing. Before I started doing this, I was terrified of it, working in public. Chase is one of the people that kind of coaxed me in the direction of doing it. But if you have the ability to sort of, do this work in public thing and, build an audience or whatever, this is like a fascinating way to grow an email list. If I were thinking about how does a brand do this without a personal brand, Ryan Pamplin from BlendJet says their single most engaging content vertical are recipes. So let's say BlendJet had a Twitter account. I could imagine them putting like a nice teaser on some incredible smoothie recipe and then saying, to get our top 100, to get our cookbook of top 100 BlendJet smoothie recipes, for keto or for whoever, like, click here. So it's kind of like an innovative way to use something, content that your audience wants, get it on social media, and then aggregate subscribers that way. That to me is like a very innovative and cutting edge way to grow. Any questions there? Because that was the next section.
Let's see. I haven't seen anything yet. I guess we have like 30 seconds. I haven't seen any new questions.
Okay. Yeah, it was just, okay. So the last section. Now, here's the exciting part. And this is what retention.com does. I'm going to explain to you how you can use identity resolution to accelerate your list growth by 10 to 15x. So the average subscription rate to a pop-up is 1.95%. We can get you at least 10 times that with this technology that we developed. So we have a couple products. I'm talking about Grow today. And basically what Grow is you can put our script on your website. An anonymous website visitor can hit it. They can leave without filling out a form. And we can identify the email address of that person. It is like magic. It is amazing. Chase has been using it for 3 years. So they're highly deliverable emails. We know how to basically send them over to your Klaviyo account in a way to where everything stays, safe and kosher and everything else. And it's just an unbelievable way to exponentially increase the growth of your list. And yeah, this is just kind of like a comparison slide. And how well does it work? Dr. Squatch is in a huge and unbelievably successful brand. I think they were bought for $800 million. 50x ROI is what they saw during their holiday season. You're not going to see 50x ROI because Dr. Squat, it's just, we're looking to outperform your other channels by 1 to 2x more. But Dr. Squash had hesitations around deliverability, which, Klaviyo helped them make sure it wasn't adversely affecting their account when they tried. They had hesitations around, whether or not there would be a high amount of spam complaints. Turns out there just isn't. And they actually had hesitations around their brand reputation and whether or not sending an email to someone that didn't actually fill out a form on your site would annoy the customer. And the way they thought about it, which I thought was really clever, was they thought about the promotions folder of a consumer. So if I'm thinking about my promotions folder right now, and then I imagined an email from a website that I just was on, mixed in with the rest of those emails, that's probably a higher intent email than anything else in there. Right? I mean, that's the way they thought about it. And then it ended up being their highest performing flow over the course of the holiday season last year. We were responsible for 5% of their total revenue. They generated over $1 million in October and $1 million in November with the tech. So to answer the question, will the emails convert? The answer is absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that is the end of the presentation there. I'm sure there are questions about that section because there always are.
Yeah. Couple questions. So Oscar asked, is that allowed? Can you do that without getting into any GDPR or any similar problems?
That is the question. That is the first question that every single person asks. So I'll stop sharing my screen. So here's the deal. It is a US only technology. We don't track people in Canada. We don't track people in Europe. The IPs are ring fenced, and every email address that we give you has a US postal address attached to it. And the email law in the US, which most people don't understand, is the CAN-SPAM law of 2003, which was reviewed again in 2019. It's opt out, not opt in. It's just not understood. So in the US, this is legal and you can do it. We actually can give you the opt-in date and URL of where these people gave their implied consent to be in the publisher network that enables this. So yeah, that's the answer there.
Cool. Yeah, Michael had a similar question about privacy concerns, emailing someone who hasn't, or as long as you have an unsubscribe button, is it kosher? But I think you answered that with the fact that as long as you have these things and you give people to opt out permissions, it's cool.
Yes, exactly.
Someone asked, do you see slower growth rates for those recipients that don't have a promotions folder?
I've never looked into that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I don't know how we would know because I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I think you would have to literally have a bunch of inboxes that were seeds, and some of them would have to not have a promotions folder, and you have to evaluate that way. But I feel like an email, that's not really great data because they're controlled by these AI algorithms now. So it's like hard to get a real, clear picture, like at scale of what's going on. So I don't know how we would figure that out, but I would love to know. It's a good question.
Yeah, for sure. Michael asked, any concern or prediction that this law may change in the US or even a state-by-state laws?
So that's usually the next question. What about this California law? I thought that it was just like GDP for the US. I have spent hundreds of hours speaking to incredibly expensive privacy attorneys. The story with the CAN-SPAM law, it got reviewed in 2019 for the first time since 2003. That's a federal level law. Now, what makes the state laws like CCPA, CPRA different than GDPR is that since there's a federal level law in the US about email that's opt out and not opt in, the state can't come in at the state level and make email opt in, or they'll get sued under federal law. So this is like a nuance that makes The US different than California. Now, will the laws continue to progress? Yes. Will they continue to get more strict? Yes. The thing that where I think this all ends is it's all about getting consent for doing stuff like this. So there are these banners that people put on the bottom of their website that say accept cookies, right? If you include a sentence that says the essence of, and we can tell you what the sentence is, we may take anonymous digital identifiers and connect them to personally identifiable information. And in which case we have an email address, we may email you. And a consumer accepts that, that is as strict as it's going to get in the US, in my opinion. So you're just going to see more, so the direction that the law is going is not going to change to opt in for email. Probably, right? I'm not a lawyer, but like I have spent hundreds of hours on this issue and this is what my company does. Right. So this is it's a highly educated opinion, but it is definitely not, I can't say that I'm a lawyer, right? Like seek legal counsel on this. I would, it's definitely currently legal. If you look at our customer list, all of those people have internal legal departments, right? Like Dr. Squatch is not doing something like this if it's illegal. So
I own a Tonal, and I always was really impressed that Tonal is a customer too.
yeah, 196 ROI. It's because they're these really high AOV products just crush, yeah, exactly. Another example of someone who's got a legal department.
Yeah. One question unrelated to retention.com, but going back to a previous thing, is Michelle asked, besides CAPTCHA, what are your recommendations to filter out bad or fake leads?
Oh man. That's a good, so, I mean, what would you say, Chase? Like,
yeah,
just be more targeted with what you're offering, perhaps, or like your traffic sources or something like that. I mean, I think it's like higher in the funnel than that,
Yeah, I think like my main thing is like leveraging like those email cleansing, those email verification tools, right? Like either on opt-in or just kind of on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis, is like running your list through some of those tools and understanding like the pass versus failed versus unknown filters, and just see like where your list lands. I haven't really had that many issues. Like I know the issue that you mentioned kind of back at the old ASP, not that those don't happen, but those are few and far between. There's not typically a ton of bad actors like this.
Totally. And they're not attacking the brand typically. They're trying to make the ESP's life miserable.
Yes.
There's just people out there who want to create chaos in the world. So that's, it just is what it is.
Yeah. Oh, she said, I see issues with bots. Let's see. Is there any more questions? And by the way, for anyone that is interested in retention, obviously no pressure, reach out to maybe Adam and his team after if you guys want more info. Adam, you guys probably have some papers and kind of case studies and stuff on it too on the website.
We got all sorts of stuff. You can either go to retention.com and sign up for a demo. And if you mention Chase, we'll give you 50% off the first year.
Yeah.
And
1.5 or 5.0?
5.0.
Okay, 50. Cool.
I just really like you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I'm feeling super generous after my week in the woods. And yeah, you can hit me up over email, adam@retention.com, and I can, send you collateral back if you want it, connect you with a salesperson if you want it. It is a deal that is too good to be true, but it is true.
Yeah. Amazing. I guess the last question. So Oscar asked, would you use a different ESP or email address to send emails to these accounts? Is Oscar, are you talking about like the retention.com leads, or is that what he's talking about? Okay.
Yes. That's a very good question that gets asked a lot by very smart people. So the answer is it won't work. And the reason is because these emails we give you have both very high positive and slightly too high negative engagement to exist on their own. The nature of what we're doing is we're providing email addresses to you at a rate that's approximately 1% to 2% of the amount of emails that went out that day, if that makes sense. The way an email program is evaluated is on a 24-hour period. They look at total emails that went out, and then they look at open rates and clicks, and they look at unsubscribes and spam complaints. So if this is starting to make sense, if all you sent out were these emails, it would be like 2 or 3 out of 1,000 spam complaints, and that wouldn't work. 1 in 1,000 is the limit. However, if it's 2 or 3 out of 1,000 spam complaints, and that's only 1% of the email that gets sent, then all of a sudden you're like 2 or 3 out of 100,000 complaints, right? So it just gets totally lost. So over 3.5 years, we've had a number of people attempt to do it, and it just always ends in tears. We have a very safe way to implement this that sort of, we can hold the contacts in a segment, send them out with your newsletter first. If they engage with the newsletter positively, we put them in a flow afterwards, and it just works beautifully.
Yeah, I don't know like the right terminology, but the way that I've always thought about what you said is like this term of like blending, right? And I think my biggest realization was the fact that like ESPs don't actually care whether or not someone opted in or not. I know it's crazy to say and it sounds weird.
Crazy.
But they only care about how people engage. If you're sending cold email and people engage great, they don't, that doesn't matter. They have no clue the difference, right? So as long as you're sending emails to people, that's good content, that's interesting content, that's relevant, that's not spammy, maybe not too frequent, right? Like if you're sending a daily email to a bunch of people that didn't opt in, maybe that's too much, right? But if you're just sending a few times a week and people are getting flows and they're getting interesting information alongside the people that actually did opt in and have been buying, the ESPs don't care. They don't know. It really doesn't matter. I think when I had that unlock a couple of years ago, that changed everything. Like I've literally been buying websites and tossing on retention.com. Like I bought a website in January I told you about called Lose the Very. We get about 150 to 200,000 visits a month. And I literally slapped on a pop-up and retention.com. And I think the list now is about 55 to 60,000 people. And I'm getting about 45% open rates across the entire universe. So it's been cool.
Yeah. It's powerful if used correctly, and we can help you use it correctly.
Yeah. Two more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Karen asked, do you need to have a list at a certain size before using retention? Does this work for a new company, or is it better for a larger company?
So here's what I would say, just to not waste anyone's time. This tends to be something that works really well and will be a great tool in your toolbox if you already know how to convert email really well and you're already sending a lot of email consistently, because the blending is what has to happen, right? Dream scenario is your list is 50,000. We can probably start talking if your list is like 15 or 20,000. If your list is 500, there are bigger fish to fry before you get around to this. And that's just me being totally honest. So yeah, it's, farther along is generally when people start having a lot of success with it.
Yeah, I think for me to add, like with our agency, we work with brands doing at least $1 million plus. To me, like, again, list size I think is important. And I think also revenue. I think like if you're at 15, 20,000 plus subs, maybe 50,000 plus being ideal, or right around about $1 million or more in revenue a year, not a month. That to me is kind of a good fit. So when clients ask and they're at about $1 million a year or more, we kind of recommend them, or the list size. I think those are kind of two things that is either kind of an and or an or. And then the last question is, are there any concerns about using retention.com for certain industries, sexual wellness, cannabis, CBD, etc.?
So you can, if I'm being totally honest, like in the CBD space, for instance, it's obviously very attractive because it's so hard to advertise those products on social. We've just seen mixed results. Like email's a funny thing, right? Like it's hard to get, for instance, emails about insurance or healthcare to deliver because they're very spammy spaces. I think the the email space has like sort of adversely decided against CBD companies, but some of our CBD companies crush, like, my buddy Mike sold CBD, like can't make it sort of show ROI for him, even though he's got 10 million in revenue. I don't know why. So it's certainly worth trying if you've checked all the other boxes. If I'm being totally honest, like I'm not as confident that it will work as some of the other spaces that are not, I don't even know what to call those spaces. I don't want to call them gray area because they're not, right? But like
Advice,
just
I
not,
guess.
yeah,
I don't know.
not as like as much of a, a vanilla sort of space, right? Like a beverage company or something.
Yeah, I think for like for example, text about sexual wellness. I think for that one you got to be careful, right? Because people might be concerned about like what's in their inbox, right? If they didn't sign up for
Yeah.
the thing, be careful, like because they didn't opt in. I think CBD of the three he mentioned sexual wellness, cannabis, and CBD. I think CBD is probably the most cool and okay, whereas like the cannabis, sexual wellness, probably have to be a little bit more careful.
Right. Exactly.
Cool. Adam, this was great. And thank you guys all for being here. Really great questions and a lot of engagement. So thank you, Adam, and thank you guys all for being here.
Thank you, Chase.
Of
And thanks
course,
everybody for listening.
of course. All right,
Hit me
guys,
up
reach
if
out
you
to
have any
Adam.
questions.
Yeah, hit him up if you have any questions, adam@retention.com. Thank you guys, and we'll send out this recording probably today or tomorrow. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.